This weekend, the new Planet of the Apes movie, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, hits theaters, so I thought this would be a good chance to rank all 10 Planet of the Apes movies from worst to best. In last place is Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes from 2001, and I thought this movie was an absolute swing and a miss, which is a shame because there's talent involved in making the movie, where we have Mark Wahlberg as our lead, and he's a very charismatic actor, but in this movie, he's not really given anything to work with. And we have Tim Burton behind the camera, but none of his directorial style is on display here, so just feels like an odd choice to direct a Planet of the Apes movie. And also, it's just filled with many weird decisions where we have a love triangle between two humans and an ape, and that's just such a weird choice in this movie. It also has way too many characters in our central group, and it feels like we get nothing special about any of these characters. So, besides our leads, we don't know anything about our side characters, and it's just they're just kind of there. The conclusion is pretty bad, and the final twist that they try to pull on the classic ending of the original movie is just such a weird choice that makes no sense. So it's just a weird and inferior movie to the original. I do enjoy Tim Roth's villainous character, but it's not like amazing or anything. It works in the movie. He's going off the walls crazy, so that's kind of fun. But besides that, and I the costumes and makeup, they're solid. Those are really the only positives I give it. It's a pretty horrible movie. In ninth place is Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, and I thought this was just kind of a boring movie that was honestly not fun to sit through. Where it has a really good central idea about Caesar, the version in the original films, leading this uprising, which you'll notice is a very similar plot to Rise, and I'll give the movie credit for that. It inspired an awesome movie, so there's good ideas here. That's very clear, but it just doesn't spend enough time on the good ideas where we get way too much of Caesar's owner Armando, who's like taking care of him and protecting him from the humans. And so when they get split up, we get way too much Armando getting like interrogated and just not very interesting. The amount of time it takes to lead up to Caesar's revolution is just it's baffling. Where we get a movie about a revolution and the actual revolution is just the very, very end. And we don't get any scenes of him really building his army or anything. All of a sudden, it's just like he's got this connection of apes where how did he get all these apes on his side? There's no scene of him trying to like bring everyone together. It just kind of cuts and everyone's in one room together. And he's like got all the apes on his side. So just kind of a weird choice, but it's mostly just a boring movie. I feel like it doesn't really execute its good plot very well. It's just meh. It's not awful. It's not good. It's just kind of a meh movie. In eighth place is Escape from the Planet of the Apes, and this one's just a really weird movie in the franchise where it doesn't really understand what the franchise is about. At least that's how I felt with the movie, where it's way too comedy centric. So the last movie ended in a way that really made it hard to do a sequel, but the studio obviously wanted a sequel, so we get Cornelius and Zira coming to Earth, and it just spends too much time with them having fun in Earth, like where they're staying in hotels, going shopping for clothes. And while I understand that's an interesting reversal of the premise of the original movie, where it's the fish out of water scenario, but it's just so weird, and then all of a sudden just takes a turn where all of a sudden the humans are against our lead ape characters, and it just feels pretty sudden. And then for as funny as the movie is to begin with, the ending gets extremely dark. We're like babies are being hunted, and it's a really weird, odd choice. I feel like the movie, while it has the interesting ideas, while it's not a bad movie or anything, it just doesn't work to me. It's just all over the place, and it gives the reasoning for how the Planet of the Apes came to be, the one we see in the original film, and I don't like that particular reasoning. So I'm happy that the prequel continuity gave us a new reasoning for how this world came to be. But yeah, I just kind of thought it was a messy movie. It's just doesn't work for me. It's not, like I said, awful. It's fine. It's just kind of just falls apart. In seventh place is Beneath the Planet of the Apes, And I kind of have a weird relationship with this movie where I feel like some of it works, other parts don't work, but I appreciate the attempts it makes to really flesh out that original movie. So I think that obviously, like many people point out this movie, that first half follows the premise of the original way too closely, where it's almost a remake of that original, where we have an actor that looks extremely similar to Charlton Heston, and it's just kind of an odd pick where eventually we do have Charlton Heston in this movie in a significantly reduced role, which I appreciate. I like how it ties into the original more. We get Nova back, but it's kind of funny when you have the scenes of the two together and they look awfully similar. But then we get into the second half of the movie and it just goes for it. The ideas in the second half are insane. We get people worshiping a nuclear bomb, we have mutants, telekinesis, and I think it just is too far. Where I'm okay with the worshiping the nuclear bomb stuff, I'm okay with the mutant angle, you could play a little bit, I'm okay with that, but when you get to telekinesis, it gets kind of ridiculous where they're making people envision fires and all the things that aren't there. I just think it went a little too far and kind of took away from the simplicity of the premise of the original movie. But I do really appreciate that they took a big swing with the ending. That ending is crazy and it's bold, and I actually think it pays off. But yeah, it's just kind of a weird movie because some stuff works, other stuff doesn't. But I appreciate how they took more big swings and it just stands out more than the movies below it. But it also was odd because they did get rid of Zira and Cornelius from most of the movie. They're in it, but not too much, which was weird because it's a direct follow up to the original. They were such big characters in that movie, and then they're really big characters in the third movie. So that was kind of an odd thing, and obviously it would have been nice to have Charlton Heston more. But yeah, I think it works overall. I think the character Nova gets really good stuff in this movie. But yeah, it's good, like lower tier good, but yeah. In sixth place is Battle for the Planet of the Apes. And I thought this was a solid sequel in the original run of movies, where it feels like it really understands what the franchise was originally about, where you have this battle between humans and apes. And even in both of those species, there are conflicts on how they should act and what should be done. So we get the human characters that believe the apes are justified in what they're doing, but think they're taking it too far. We have apes that think the apes need to be going further against the humans. And I just think that's really interesting. That's one of the reasons that Dawn is an amazing movie. And I think that it works, this movie. Obviously not as well as Dawn, but I enjoyed this movie. I think it's fun that we get this end battle, kind of conclusion to this franchise in the original run. And I think it has some creative ideas in the end battle where we get like school buses going into battle, or one school bus, because they did have a lesser budget and it is noticeable in this movie, but doesn't really take away from the fun, I don't think. But it just has some creative like wasteland ideas. We're not super far into the timeline where the world is completely destroyed, so there's some remnants of civilization that I think is kind of makes for a fun setting. But yeah, I think the character Caesar in this original run, this is the movie where I feel like he gets more fleshed out and is more interesting of a character. But I just think it was a solid sequel. I feel like the character relationships were good and it culminated in a fun battle that doesn't keep you bored. In fifth place is the original Planet of the Apes. And while this movie is in fifth place, I think the top five of this list go from really good to absolutely perfect. So it's in fifth place, but it's a classic for a reason, and I think it holds up really well. It's a great idea for a movie, and Rod Sterling's script feels like an episode of his show, The Twilight Zone, and it's very eerie, and it's just a really fresh idea for a movie, and it plays out fantastic on screen. Charlton Heston gives a really good lead performance, and while everyone knows what the ending is when they watch the movie nowadays, it still hits so hard, and it's a wild ending to go for in this movie. And I think it's just a really effective movie overall. It has a good pace, which is a little faster than most movies out of the 60s, and out of the original run of Planet of the Apes movies, it feels like it's the fastest paced movie, which is shocking because it's actually the longest out of that original run. But yeah, overall, it's a really effective movie. I'd say one thing that holds it back a little bit is it does focus a little bit too much on the politics of the ape culture. And obviously, the movies above this, the effects of the apes are just better. And I mean, it was the 60s. There was nothing really they could do to make it compete against these top four, but for the time, the effects are strong and the makeup, costumes all work really well. And I just think it's a really strong movie. It's a classic. Fourth place is the first in the modern run of Planet of the Apes movies, Rise of the Planet of the Apes. And I think this movie is awesome. It's a great movie, and in like these top five in any other list, they could have been number one. But the Planet of the Apes franchise is just so strong that amazing movies have to compete. But yeah, this movie works so well. It works really well as an origin story for Caesar, where if you look at this modern trilogy that we had, and now obviously four films, but when it was just a trilogy, it really goes through Caesar's rise, and this one just works really well as he's like an underdog, and we slowly see him become this massive leader that changes the world, and I think that's really cool. I think James Franco has a really interesting like plot to his character, where we have John Lithgow's Alzheimer's story, and I think that's really emotional. And I think James Franco's relationship with Caesar is really great. So I think his character, they find a really good way to put him into the story where he doesn't feel like the obligatory human character. You care about what's going on in his life, and what goes on in his life creates the Planet of the Apes. So it's really interesting. I think what holds it back from the three above this is I don't think the cinematography is as great, and while the motion capture is really good, I think they just get a little better as they go along. And so those are really just nitpicks. It's an awesome movie. I'm gonna say this with every Planet of the Apes movie he's involved in. Andy Serkis is phenomenal. So yeah, this is a really good movie and an awesome way to start the modern Planet of the Apes franchise. Third place is the newest movie in this franchise, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. And I thought this was an excellent addition to the franchise. This movie is fantastic. And the news just came out that this modern Planet of the Apes franchise is designed to be a 9-film saga. And I'm so down for it. This is an exciting new way to continue on the legacy of Caesar and have some fresh characters in there, where Noah is a great new protagonist. I liked May. I liked Proximus as the villain. I thought he was very menacing. Raka is a really fun character. I just think this was a great new place to take the story, where our trilogy is so tight, so perfect, that it was going to be hard to follow it up, but I think they do that really well. I think that the new time that they take this to, where this is many generations later, I think that was a good choice, so we can see how Caesar's legacy has impacted the apes, how certain groups of the apes take it to mean different things. I thought that was just really interesting. I thought the plot built to a really intense conclusion that had me on the edge of my seat. And I thought the pacing was excellent. This is the longest Apes movie, and it flies by. It leaves you wanting more. You're super invested in the story, super invested in the characters, and I just can't wait to see where the franchise goes from here. This movie blew me away. I was really excited, but it surpassed my expectations, and I can't wait to watch it more. Just an excellent addition to this excellent modern Apes franchise. In second place is Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, and I know I'm going to sound like a broken record, but this movie is excellent. I don't have any complaints about this movie. I think this is an amazing entry to this franchise. It has an incredible villain in Koba who's menacing and really challenges Caesar. And I think that's what the movie does really well. It has the relationships are just so complex, where we have Caesar and the humans, we have Caesar and Koba, we have the different factions of humans, different factions of the apes, which apes will follow Caesar, which apes will choose to go with Koba. And I think that just makes a really, really interesting movie. And it just makes it so character driven, where it is a spectacle movie. We do get awesome apes action. And when the action does come, it's insane. The whole ending sequence is wild. The final fight is thrilling. It's incredible. But the emotional moments just work so well. And I think what puts this movie above the first one for me is I think I like seeing Caesar's leader role more, where the first is more of his origin. I think him as the leader, we get a more emotional story. We get some deeper themes about just how the apes should treat humans. And I just thought this was an amazing movie. It's a sequel that improves upon the first, takes the franchise in a really interesting direction. I liked how movies like that have CGI leads, a lot of times when you have human characters, they feel like, oh, we have to have the humans characters there so the audience will have characters to latch onto. But I feel like the human characters here are really interesting and they don't feel like they're just obligatory characters in the movie. They feel like they really add something to the movie. And I thought that's really fun. Jason Clarke and his relationship with Caesar is really interesting. I just think this movie is super emotional and just it just really works. And the only thing that holds it below my first pick is I think the movie I'm going to put above it is just a little more emotional and hits me a little harder. But I think this movie is flawless. I think it is an absolutely awesome blockbuster. And yeah, I can't recommend it enough. But in first place for me is War for the Planet of the Apes. And I think this movie is one of the best blockbusters ever made. I think it is the perfect combination of all the elements you want in a blockbuster, where it's thrilling, it's heartfelt, it's tragic, it's inspiring, and it even has the occasional humor, and it never feels out of place. It feels like the perfect blend. You're so entertained, you're so invested, you really care on an emotional level about these characters, and just the conclusion that we're building to just works so well. It's a perfect end to this trilogy and perfectly wraps up Caesar's character arc. And it's just, it's absolutely perfect. I think this movie works so well. I like it every time I revisit it even more. I think that Woody Harrelson is a very menacing villain, but at the same time, the movie lets you understand where he's coming from. Where I think that adds to the complexity of the situation a little more. And I think this movie does a really interesting job of introducing the apes that side with the humans and how our lead apes respond to that and just this whole situation of the humans versus humans and just this menacing showdown where this is the movie where everything's coming to a head and how are our apes going to respond to this situation. And I think the directions the movie goes are amazing. I think the script is super good. Andy Serkis, easily his best performance as Caesar, and it is a shame that he was not nominated for best actor for this role because he is fantastic. I think our side characters like Maurice and Nova, they're really good. I just think I can't. I could talk about this movie all day. It is an absolutely amazing movie. It's a great blockbuster and a great way to end this trilogy. And yeah, for it was the first Planet of the Apes movie I saw in theaters, and I just I just love this movie. It's fantastic. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and please tell me in the comments how you would rank the Planet of the Apes movies, and like and subscribe.